Thank you for listening to the Following Films podcast. Levi has snagged a no-lease apartment, sight unseen in the Hollywood Hills, to crash at while he ties up loose ends for his exodus from Los Angeles. He quickly strikes up a rapport with his new neighbor John, swapping stories like old friends under the glowing, smoke-filled skies of the city. Soon after meeting, Levi and John witness something impossible in one of their apartments. Terrified at first, they soon realize this could change their lives and give them a purpose. With dollar signs in their eyes, these two eccentric strangers will attempt to prove the supernatural. Today I'm joined by Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson, the co-creators, co-stars, co-editors, writers, and cinematographers behind Something in the Dirt. Their oddball chemistry shines on screen and in the script as these two isolated, unfulfilled individuals spur each other towards wormholes and away from reality. Something in the Dirt tells a tale of paranoid times, where every answer imaginable is just a Google search away. Something in the Dirt will be in theaters on November 4th. Hope you enjoy the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, gentlemen. I really appreciate it.
Oh, likewise, man. Thank you.
Well, the first thing I wanted to ask you about, and I apologize if I'm starting off on completely the wrong foot, but I've seen the film 3 times now. I saw it back in February twice, and I saw it again last night. And I just need to know if you've seen Incubus starring William Shatner.
No.
What is it?
So it's a movie that he did back in the 60s, the one that it's kind of notorious for. It's the only film that was made in Esperanto. So it's been one of those things that every time I see your movie, just that line that you have about what is it? The geometry of magnetism or magnets, whatever that is, that was in Esperanto. It just always triggers that little thing in my mind that's somehow like this reference to that thing in a way. Because it was the guy from The Outer Limits was the one who directed that movie, and then Your Connection to Twilight Zone, those kinds of things. So I kind of have my own personal version of Something in the Dirt going on every time I hear that line. And to me, it's this beautiful line that really encapsulates what I love about this movie, because it's partially grounded in reality and also bullshit at the same time. And that's kind of, I think, the Rosetta Stone to this movie.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Have you ever been to this place called the Museum of Jurassic Technology in Los Angeles?
No, I've never heard of this. And this is, it just jumped to the top of the list of things I needed to go to.
It's a great little museum that you go through it, and it's a museum that has some oddities in it, but it feels like a museum. And after you go through a couple of floors, it's small. You go through a couple of floors of these, here's the American campsite, is kind of like but from like an alien anthropological view, as if it's like not an American, like as if you're not an American. And you start seeing there's little like bits of cryptozoology that don't seem totally fake, but like totally unbelievable. But you start realizing that half or some percentage or just all of it is completely fake, and it doesn't tell you. And that attitude was a bit of the inspiration for the movie.
Well, it definitely comes through. And I love, this is one of the most, it's such a wonderful movie. The idea that the humor here, it's very broad at times, but it's also incredibly specific, that I feel like if you don't have a certain, reference point, that things could just fly right past you and you wouldn't catch it necessarily the first time. And it seems like it's just pulling from all these of you that are between the two of you, because I would use the word singular, but it's obviously the two of you. And there's something that is just so charming about that, because it does feel like it's one voice, and it feels like in that way it becomes utterly relatable, because it's something that's so personal and so specific. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about the making of this and what drove to make such a cool, wonderful, little bizarre film.
Yeah, kick it off by, you make an interesting point that our movies do tend to our movies do have a singular sentiment, a singular vision, a singular feel to them, despite there being two of us. But this movie specifically, the two characters are, by their nature, the point of their relationship is they're wildly different, nearly opposite people in many ways. I'm just you saying that made me realize, like, oh yeah, like still singular vision, but more so than ever, the two characters are pulling in very, very different directions. And that was part of the inspiration for making it. There are so many points of inspiration for the genesis of the film. A big one was just our desire to each play a character that was wildly different than who we are in real life. And a lot of the construction of these guys was based off of that. Some of that was the excitement of just playing something that's way different than who we are. And some of it was driven by like, well, if you know, the more different you make these fictional people than you are in real life, the less likely people are, once it enters the world, to think that it was autobiographical to you in some way. So it makes you feel more free to make them as flawed as you want to make them, because no one's going to think it's actually you. There's other, I mean, so many points of inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Museum of Jurassic Technology is one of them. The desire to explore the idea of what we would do with a haunted house movie. It's barely a haunted house movie. It would be really weird if they marketed it that way. But that was the problem, is we kept on pitching on big haunted house movie franchises and stuff like that. And they'd say, like, get weird, guys, get weird. Like, we need something outside of the box. And then we'd get weird and pitch, you know, a lot of these ideas that are in something in the dirt. And they were like, yeah, not that weird, not that weird, get the job. And but we knew that we knew that these ideas were good ideas. And so we ended up in some ways making an omnibus of a lot of them and putting it into the construct of two people that are exploring all of these ideas and taking a good shot at them.
Something that's not in the movie, because we found out, we're just kind of sort of focusing a little more on it right after we shot. But obviously the movie makes a reference to Jack Parsons in weaving this fictional cult history of Los Angeles. And something that's not in the movie that's really interesting, that does still oddly influence the movie in real life, is that the movie makes a statement that, you know, Jack Parsons may have something to do with this phenomenon, Aleister Crowley, all of that. And then it kind of jumps to Aldous Huxley having a psychedelic experience at some point and getting into Laurel Canyon culture at a certain point of these sort of famous counterculture rock stars who had passed away, who were affiliated or lived here in some way. What's not in the movie that's interesting is that Jack Parsons' widow is really the bridge from Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons and the sort of what was the Hermetic or the Golden Dawn and what that became Thelema. Like her role in like roughly 1930s Western Hermetic esoteric occult, she was the one who, after Jack Parsons died, who carried it on into the psychedelic 1960s. So some of the mythology these guys are pointing out in the canyon is some of it. It's really interesting because, again, there's not much of the occult to draw from in LA, but it's interesting that there is this woman who was Jack Parsons' widow, who was kind of responsible for carrying that stuff forward into more the modern day, or at least the 60s and 70s.
You know, I just realized, only because of our personal connection to it, there's one other person that probably would have existed without Marjorie Cameron, which is Kenneth Anger.
Kenneth Anger, yeah.
And I say it because I lived across the street from the house he would party in, and it's like this black house that we ended up at a couple like Halloween parties or something like that in there. And someone said, "Oh, this is Samson DeBreer's house," which is this kind of occult socialite that would hang out with Marjorie Cameron and Kenneth Anger. And they ended up making, you know, movies together called Initiation of the Pleasure Dome and a couple others. Dennis Hopper was probably hanging out at that house too.
You say there's not much to draw upon as far as the history of the occult in Los Angeles.
Like that's literally all of it. I know it's not actually true, by the way. Like there's definitely occult scholars that would really turn their noses up at what we're saying. We're just talking about by comparison to Western Europe or anywhere.
Oh well, okay, yeah.
But by comparison to London, where it's just it's dripping into every stone, you know.
And the stuff that's happened in LA, though, it's notorious, though. It has a longevity to it. It's not woven into the fabric of the society necessarily in LA. You don't feel it at every corner. But I wonder how much of that is when you do go to, when you're in Eastern Europe and you just see these old buildings, how much of that is us projecting it upon it and how much of it is actually there. You get a similar feeling when you're in the Northeast, and I think to some degree, but yeah, the history of it's not quite the same, obviously. And to me, it's like one of the first tricks I learned how to do when I was first picked up a VHS camera when I was in 6th grade and started messing around and trying to make movies on my own, was taking a video camera and pointing it at the monitor and getting that video feedback, that endless loop kind of thing. And that's that playing with that idea and those kind of do-it-yourself things, those sort of tricks that you can do, almost feels like the structure of this film to me, where it's these layers on top of each other, where there's, except in each projection, each image that's repeating itself, there's slight deviations. And that's kind of also one of the things I started picking up in rewatching this film, is that you can tell the point of view of what's real and what's fake to some degree by how it's being shot at times. And you can see whether this is the reenactment, but it's not always clear. And I think this is something that I would never be able to unlock, but I feel like you guys know what's going on in each one of those shots. Is that the case?
Yeah, I would say that is the case. There's definitely, like, it is designed, though, that the movie would be open to interpretation of exactly how much of it is real and how much of it is fake, and whose point of view a scene is. And sometimes we just made sure that it fit right in the middle of the Venn diagram so that it could be both. So I can tell you, if you locked both of us in separate rooms, and said, like, all right, precisely say what scenes are whose point of view and which, there's a chance there would be minor discrepancies because they were designed to be both often, or not both, but multiple. Because there's, of course, the unseen other filmmaker, the voiced by Issa Lopez, and other editors that have clearly had their hands on it.
and I love that the editing part of it, that you're making that your Spinal Tap drummer, that you've just had this endless line of editors that are going this sort of film that they just give up, throw their hands up and walk away from it, that they can't, either for moral reasons or perhaps it's just that they're not able to work with these guys. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about using editing as a tool in this film, probably more than you ever have as a narrative point, where there's direct jokes from the cutaways and these interstitials that you have that are some of my favorite moments in the film, where you just have what it cuts away to is where the punchline is. And how much of these things that you're cutting to were found, and how much of them did you have to create? I'm sorry, I know it's a lot to it.
Okay.
Today's episode of the Following Films podcast is brought to you by Bookman's. I'm joined today by my son, Jacob. Jacob, say hello to people. Oh, there you go. You're already on it. So, Jacob, when you go to Bookman's, what is it that you like to look at? What do you like to get?
To get toys, and movies, and the coffee news.
You like to look at the movies, and you like to get the coffee news, the newspaper they have out front? That's great. So, last time we went into Bookman's, I picked up a movie. What movie did I get, Jacob?
Escape from New York, but that's the name as it hurts of the as the cover. Sorry.
So no, you're okay. Would you talk a little bit about what you see on the cover of Escape from New York on this Blu-ray that I got?
So based on this cover, you see glass shattered, and also the Statue of Liberty's face fell apart, because in this movie, Escape from New York, is the introduction is a man trying to save the president's daughter, and New York turns into a prison in this movie. And there's the hero, as you can see, very strong, in fact.
Oh, yeah. Now, this is one of my favorite movies. I love this movie. Now, you're too young to watch it because you're only 6 years old, but do you think in a couple of years from now, when you get a little bit older, you'll want to check out Escape from New York?
Yes!
Okay. What's a movie that you've seen that we picked up at Bookman's that you like? Come here, talk so that people can hear you.
Little Shop of Horrors?
Little Shop of Horrors. That's a great movie. So when you're going to Bookman's, you can get movies, DVDs, Blu-rays, 4K, Laserdisc, VHS. You can also get comic books, newspapers, magazines, home furnishings. You can get tons of stuff there. Because remember, Bookman's has your cool covered. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Yay! That was a good idea.
Well, the cutaways were something that when we were rehearsing, we had decided to do, and it was just like a joke. But I think what would cut to this here, like, for example, I don't know, it may have been the Levi talking about the dishwasher he had worked with who lost his jaw to some plant before John's bite into the fruit. Yeah. It may have been that moment, but it was something like that, where it's like, what if we could just cut to this jarring image for a joke, and then we realized that it's like, oh, we're already making a documentary. Why would we not just do that all over the movie? It created a lot of extra shots. A lot of extra shots.
Our entire next year because of that.
And then in terms of it being an editor's movie, it really is we work with a third editor. Aaron and I, we do a lot of the editing, but really it's our third editor, Michael Felker, who does a lot of the heavy lifting. And this movie was a huge accomplishment, or just a very impressive thing that he did, that we've always wanted to honor, because it's a very hard movie to edit, not only from a standpoint of, like we were talking about, of like whose point of view is it at any given time, unreliable narrator, all that stuff. But the other thing was that the footage itself is shot on so many different cameras, and some of those cameras, literally, it's hard to even find an editing program to have the footage digitized.
Yeah.
Other than that, just a massive amount of data and information to be wrangled in and shaped into what he did. Insanely impressive. Can't even imagine. I'm so happy we didn't have to do that part.
I legitimately believe that if Michael Felker gets the attention for the editing that he did in this film that he deserves, it would be studied in community college film classes. It is a good case study of low budget film editing that it's clearly an editor's movie without being this flashy thing. But the movie can be edited in 800 million different ways, and it's about the point of view of the edit. It's actually reflective on itself in that way.
Yeah, and again, it's that video feedback thing where the way you're editing it, whose point of view are you actually representing at that moment, and it's so incredible that you can have a movie that's just shy of 2 hours long, or right at 2 hours long, that is, as you were saying, the point of view of this unreliable narrator that does leave some ambiguity, but it doesn't feel like there's really any fat on this film. I feel like you couldn't really remove any of these pieces to it, and it just feels like any one of these scenes and the weight of the film, it would just fall apart underneath it. That everything here is absolutely necessary in the actual end product. And I can't say that about a lot of films, and especially, revisiting it 3 times now at this point.
Thank you. That's very good to hear. We had a sort of mystery occur where the script was 93 pages long or something, and the first cut was somehow 3.5 hours, and we just don't even know how that happened. And it was really, really, really hard to get it down, because it wasn't everything built on the next thing. So you couldn't just pull something out and the next thing didn't make sense. And there was one relatively larger chunk that Michael Felker figured out how to pull out, and was replaced with the audio John recording phone call between him and Levi portion. That was something that was completely come up. Michael Felker completely came up with that. And it was a huge solve, because we were able to pull out a gigantic chunk of the movie that was making it really unwieldy.
What's also great about micro budget filmmaking in that way is Justin and I watched the solve that Michael Felker had temped in. He kind of he used his own voice and kind of wrote what it could be and all of that. And it was just a card in the movie. And then 2 hours later, we'd written it for our own voice, recorded it, and it was in the movie. And it was great, where it's oh, does this solve work? And it just was there immediately. Whereas we know from experience, on a large budget thing, that could take a month. It could take a month to book the actors, to get the studio space, to get them to cut it in, to, all of that.
Is there anything you've taken away from working in these constraints and this? Because even for you guys who have always done things on, not always, you've worked on kind of every scale you could possibly work at, but the stuff that I'm really attracted to are these smaller, personal films that you do. And I'm wondering if there's something from this one, which is probably the most micro budget, smallest confined space that you've worked in with the smallest crew you've ever had. Is this something that you would take away, things you've learned from this now that the world has opened up a little bit more from where you've shot this, from when you've shot this?
Yeah, I mean, probably the biggest lesson from it was just that we fully realizing that we don't make smaller films so that we can go make bigger films. We make smaller films because we love making smaller films, and the two different endeavors can really feed off of each other in terms of inspiration. But I think, something we already more or less had realized, but it was just definitely like the final like reinforcement that it's like, no, this is never something to be left behind. This is something that you will continuously do throughout the rest of your life because it's important.
I completely agree with that. And there's the idea at the end of this film that I think is so beautiful, the making friends. And it's something about not waiting for permission to get the chance to do the thing that you want to do. Is something that I actually learned from you guys back when you did Spring, because you were one of my first interviews that I ever did. Was I talked to you guys? Yeah. It was a long time ago. I had no idea what I was doing. I haven't gotten much better, but I think I've gotten more confident as I've gone along. And you gave validation, and you were kind and you were warm then as you are now. And it was something that actually had a profound impact. And I didn't wait for permission for somebody to say, it's okay to do this. You should be doing this. It was seeing guys like you doing this work that made me say, yeah, I think I can just go out and do this and make this thing on my own because I feel like doing it. And thank you for that. And for the validation. I appreciate it.
An honor. That's very cool. That is a good reason why we do what we do, is that hopefully we can inspire some good movies to get made.
Well, I don't know about the movies being good or anything like that I would do, but it's the act of doing the thing that's fun to do on the weekend. So I enjoy that part of it. And quality, well, maybe that'll come eventually. But thank you both so much for taking the time to do this today. It was really a pleasure to speak with you again. And I hope that I get to time soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Talk to you again.
Bye-bye.
Time enough to figure you out. Time enough to write this down. Wish me luck, give me hope. So my voice cracked.